Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome along to WD18, the Watford fan channel. My name is Jacob Culshaw. I'm joined by Sam Ucko to discuss the latest transfer news surrounding Watford Football Club. Sam, how are you, my friends? Good to see you.
It's good to be back into it. Nice to see you, Jacob. Have we done a video yet since you've been back from Germany?
No, I think the last one I was on, I was in my hotel room in Dusseldorf. So yeah, it's good to be back. A bit weird actually, mate. I have to say, we did a call the other day, myself, Sam, and Charlie, and to get back into it and get back into the flow of things felt weird. But it's nice to be back, and it's nice to be discussing a bit of Watford news as well. And the man that has rejoined the football club is Moussa Sissoko. The 34-year-old has returned to Watford on a free agent on a 2-year deal. Obviously, Sissoko spent the 21-22 Premier League season with Watford and now is back at Vicarage Road to link up with his former teammate, Tom Cleverley, who is the current Watford head coach. Sam, you did a TikTok on it. You did an Instagram reel on it. Make sure you do follow us at WD18 fans to see our reaction. But give us your thoughts, give us your feelings around this one. Moussa Sissoko back at Watford.
Yeah, it's one that's seemingly been in the pipeline for a while now. I think the news broke, must have been a week or two from Adam Leventhal, that Watford were interested in Sissoko and there were talks taking place. But it's always felt like that Sissoko could come back to Watford. I dug up a tweet that I did at the start of the last transfer window when we were doing. I just put a tweet out saying, predict a player who Watford will sign this window. And I said, I think we'll re-sign Sissoko because I think he was a player that Slaven Bilic was interested in as well when Slaven Bilic was at the football club. He's a player who now is associated with a certain agent who's got very close ties to Watford, which we won't get into now. But it always did feel that there was a sense of inevitability to Sissoko coming back to Watford. How I feel about it on the surface, and we'll get into it, it's mixed feelings. It depends on what his role is going to be at Watford, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I've kind of had discussion, Sam, with other Watford fans, is obviously with Ismail Kone leaving the football club, it did mean we had to bring in another midfielder. I think it surprised maybe a few people that we have gone and dipped back in to Sissoko. Watford do like a return with certain players and managers. Flores is a good example. Jonathan Bond coming back, Sissoko coming back.
Tom Cleverley is another one.
Tom Cleverley coming back. So we do like to dip ourselves into the return market. But I guess the question for me, Sam, is does it make sense if you're Tom Cleverley? And we'll get into some of his comments in just a second. But does it make sense for Tom Cleverley? I think it makes sense for Moussa Sissoko, but does it make sense for Watford to bring him back?
I think it does. I think it's a signing that makes sense for all parties if he's used correctly. I think too many people are sort of sat on the fact that he's an Ismail Kone replacement. I don't think he is. I think he's quite clearly a Jake Livermore replacement, bringing in that experienced head into the middle of the park, someone who might start a few games, particularly in the middle of the season, like we saw with Jake Livermore, and almost pick up those tired legs. He's someone who can bring energy to the midfield. And he's someone who, in a Watford team that has quite a few young faces in there this season, the likes of Matty Pollock, James Morris, Ryan Andrews, Jack Greaves. I think he's someone who can offer them a lot of experience as well. He was club captain as well when Watford were last here, albeit in a season that we all probably want to forget. So I think from that perspective and a cheap deal as well, it seems, I think it makes sense from that point of view. But yeah, we'll get into it with Tom Cleverley's comments. I just think it all depends on how often he will play and what the rest of the team is going to look like next season.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said at the top, he's joined as a free agent on a 2-year deal. As Sam mentioned, he served as captain during his time at the club before, scoring twice, playing alongside Tom Cleverley, who was then his teammate and obviously now head coach. And Cleverley went on to say this to the club website: we all know his qualities, Sissoko, as a player, and he's still playing at a very high level. He's going to be a key part of the squad this year. Cleverley went on to say it's a statement signing. I think it shows you the ambition that myself and the club have got moving forward. He brings a real powerhouse to the middle of the pitch. He's a consistent performer. Even though he's older, he's one of those players who still wants to learn. He'll be coachable. He'll be one of our eyes and ears when trying to carry out our game plan to win us football matches. He's a key figure, someone I was pushing for us to bring in, and I'm delighted that it's happened. That last line, particularly, Sam, on Tom Cleverley being a driving force in this deal, it's been one of the sort of contentious issues around Watford head coaches and the ownership model in terms of the influence the head coach has. I think it's fair to say that Tom Cleverley wouldn't say that if he wasn't involved in this deal. And there's obviously been rumours that He turned down Tikvich, who's been training with the squad. The rumour is that he decided against that move. But on Moussa Sissoko, the fact that Cleverley was such a key supporter of this move, how does that make you feel as a fan?
I think there might be a bit more to it in terms of Clev saying that it was he was the driving force behind it. I've got a feeling that potentially parameters were set, so he was probably given a list of 5 or 6 players who the club have links with. For example, Mogi Bayat clients or ex-players or that sort of thing, players who would be accessible to Watford. And then from that list, potentially Tom Cleverley singled out Moussa Sissoko from there and pushed for him to sign from there, because I do think it might be a tad unlikely that Cleverley would have just gone in for Moussa Sissoko as one of his first signings. So I think in that respect, he was probably a driving force behind a set of players that were already that would have been given to him on a list. But look, if Cleverley is happy with the signing, then I think we all have to be, because with the rumours surrounding Tikvich as well, which haven't been confirmed yet and might never be confirmed because he was never a Watford player, it is refreshing to see a manager having a bit more of a say on the squad.
I guess the one thing to say on Cleverley's relationship with Sissoko is the fact that he knows him inside out. I mean, Sissoko played 36 games for Watford in that season, and a lot of them, if I remember correctly, were alongside Tom Cleverley. I know Cleverley had a few issues with injury, but he played a lot in that season together. So this is a guy who knows Sissoko inside out. Just a couple of other comments that I wanted to pick out from Cleverley's sort of press conference on Sissoko. He mentioned about that Sissoko's looked after his body in the most professional way possible. He's still in really good, really supreme condition was the words. He's one of those players who's not only a role model when he's on the pitch, but when he's at the training ground and when he's outside the training grounds, thinking how he recovers, how he rests, how he looks after himself. He covers a lot of cultures in the team as well, with background and upbringing, and also how many years he's played in England as well. And the 3 players he picked out as leaders, Sam, Dan Bachmann, Wes Hoot and Moussa Sissoko. So there was a lot made under Ishmael at the start of last season about this leadership group. And it seems like those 3 are going to be the driving force in the leadership group as well. Does that make sense for you to pick out those 3? I think Clever's almost identified those 3.
Yeah, I think so. That leadership group was quite iconic. There were 5 players in there, and within 3 months of the season, 3 of them have been fined for breaking their own rules. God, I think it was Ben Hamer was late to training. Imran Loser. Oh God, I can't even remember now. But they all broke their own rules. I think it does make sense. I mean, it's almost like we got a past captain in there as part of the leadership group. We've got the club captain in there in Daniel Bachmann, and we've got the playing captain in there in Wesley Hoot. I think it is relatively clear now that I think Hoot and Bachmann are probably doing the captain responsibilities joint at this point. I think Bachmann's sort of overseeing the entire thing, whereas Wes Hoot's the on the pitch captain, because Tom Cleverley made it clear last season that he prefers his captain being outfield. So I think it does make sense. It's players who have all played for Watford before, players who all have experience in the game as well. So yeah, hopefully they can all be that driving force in the dressing room. And I think something about Sissoko as well, that he's played right at the top before Watford as well. He's played in the Champions League final. I might be wrong, but he's played in a World Cup and or a European Championships as well for France. So yeah, he's someone who's been involved at the highest level, and someone who can hopefully put his arm around the likes of Jack Greaves and guide them through their first potentially full-on season in English football.
Yeah, more than 70 France caps to Moussa Sissoko's name. So as Sam mentioned, this is a guy who brings in a wealth of experience, as we knew the first time round. But the second time round, do you know what? Just my take on this one, Sam. I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of, I think this is a Jake Livermore replacement rather than an Ishmael Kone replacement. I still think that void needs to be filled by Watford and the recruitment team. I felt last season we had quite an unbalanced and uncombative midfield, and those 2 traits aren't great. I felt that the system that Cleverley played brought a bit more balance to it, but I think Sissoko is a pretty decent solution to the problems that we had last season. He does provide some leadership, which we lacked a little bit last season as well. I think probably why, and I don't want to speak on behalf of people, but a few people are feeling down about this one, is probably the age of Sissoko. The fact it's a 2-year deal at 34 probably isn't isn't the best scenario, I guess, because then if it does go wrong in this season, then we kind of stuck with him for another season. I think also the fact that he was part of a team that got relegated, and also we sentiment is a massive thing in football, and I think as fans I'm guilty of this as well. I look at certain players at certain times in the club, and Sissoko rather was one of our better players, I thought, that season in 21-22. But because he was associated as the captain that relegation season, I think people always remember Norwich at home when he released the letter pre-match and it all went horribly wrong on match day. So there's a lot of things that go with that. But I think when you take out the sort of emotion and the sentiment out of it and you just go, is he a good replacement for Jake Livermore? I think he ticks a lot of boxes, and I think he's an improvement on Jake Livermore in terms of ability and in terms of career as well, Sam.
I think so. My concern, and I think I had the same concern when Emmanuel Dennis came back in January. It seems that players who have been part of failing dressing rooms, and we don't know this for sure, but potentially toxic dressing rooms, are being brought back into the club or being kept on at the club. Now, I'm not saying Sissoko was responsible for it at all, what happened in that relegation season, because like you say, I did think that he was one of our better players that season. But just going through the squad now, we've got Backman here, who was part of that relegation team, and Ngakia, Ciaralta, I can't remember if James Morris was there that season, but Ken Sema as well was there, and Edo Kayembe, and now Moussa Sissoko. That's a very large number of players who are part of ultimately a dressing room that failed us. And I just wonder at times if, like I said, when Emmanuel Dennis came back in, is having those ingredients back in the dressing room could potentially result in something a little bit toxic again. If things, I don't know if that's the right word, but if things start to go wrong at some point next season with those players in the dressing room, could things start to turn sour again? I don't want to single out any individual players there, but I think that's a slight concern I do have.
Do you think that's still the same though after the season we have Ishmael? Because I think there was a lot of pros and cons to Ishmael. One of the pros I think he left behind is probably the dressing room culture. I think there's a difference between the dressing room culture and the club culture, because I don't think the club culture can change until the owner changes. Yeah. But the dressing room culture, I felt from the outside anyway, and sort of what you hear from the articles that Andrew French released, Adam Leventhal, etc., there was a sense there was quite a lot of togetherness in that Watford squad, Sam. So do you feel there's a difference now maybe to that team that we saw back then under Ranieri, Hodgson, Cisco?
Jesus. We've spoken about it quite a bit, but Andrew French released an article that we had something like 35 players and that season, and players were being sent home from training at one point because there just weren't enough. I mean, there wasn't enough space for everyone to train with the first team. So players were being sent home, and that was obviously a huge contributing factor to that toxic environment. And I 100% agree. I think it is a very different squad. Obviously, the squad is more together. I think it's more likable squad as well for a fan base. It's a group of players who we can identify with a lot more as well. It's just those concerns, though, that when things do go badly, players who previously weren't able to get us out of that rut, will they be able to do so this time? That's a question that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's a question. I think from my end on Sissoko, the question I have if he's still the same player that Cleverley spoke so highly about in that season, because whilst I don't think it'd be a stretch to say he ripped it up, but he definitely was one of our better performers in that season, and was one of the shining lights of that season. Yeah. I think the idea of Sissoko is great. I think it's in terms of the idea of him and what the signing represents. But as I said, the question is whether he can produce the levels that we have seen before, and also whether he's going to be a starter and whether he's more of a player like Livermore who came in when required. Now, I see Sissoko, Sam, as a player who comes in for games where you bring him on at 60 minutes, you start him against maybe away from home when you go into one of the better teams and you need a bit more steel in the midfield and you need a bit more of that nous and that know-how. I don't know if I'd want him to be starting every single week is probably my reservations with this one. That's where I have the concern, is that we don't bring in anyone else and we're left with Sissoko relying on him at 34 to play 46 games in the season. I don't think that's viable for us.
Yeah, I think if the team is left as it is now, I think he will probably start games. It won't shock me if he starts anyway, to be honest with you, with the quality that Watford have at the moment. But I agree with you. I think that will hopefully be his role, to almost come in and have that know-how, show that experience, to see games out a bit like Jake Livermore did. I think in some ways as well, I was thinking about sort of the profile of player of Moussa Sissoko, and I think back to the England game. God, who did we play in the last 16 again? That's Slovakia, wasn't it?
Slovakia,
And
yeah.
I think we brought on Conor Gallagher towards the end, who was just running, chasing down the ball. And I always see Moussa Sissoko as that sort of player as well, when Watford are trying to see out leads, just to bring that energy into the midfield, fresh leg, someone who's able to run a lot and cover a lot of ground. So yeah, I think you're right, Jacob, with the idea of Moussa Sissoko is good. I just think it's the way that he's used and how big of a role he actually does have to play this season.
Just to wrap up, Sam, on how we think he'll be used. So obviously, if Cleverley continues with the 3-4-3 formation that transitions into a 5 at the back without the ball, those two central midfielder spots now, with Sissoko coming in, is Sissoko, Kiembe, Deli Bashiru, and Imran Louza. Is that sufficient? Would you say if let's say in a month's time you had those four midfielders for those two spots, do you think that's adequate, and do you think that's a good balance in midfield?
I don't think it is. I don't think there's enough depth there. I also don't think there's enough quality in there.
Do you want one more, do you, Sam?
I think one more, definitely. Just someone. I think Ishmael Kone, and I think we will see it. I think while at times certainly I was never critical of him as a player, because I think he's top, and I think we'll see a really good side to him at Marseille. I think we can all accept that he did lack a bit of consistency sometimes, and we saw that he came in and out of the team. But I think we'll see a big Ishmael Kone shaped hole in the middle of the park next season. So I do think we need to bring in one more name, one more player who can almost fill in that profile that Ishmael Kone is leaving behind.
Sweet. Any final thoughts, Sam? Sissoko back at Watford. What shirt has he got? Has that been announced? That's always something I'm always sucked into. Any other final thoughts, Sam? Just in terms of this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously being quite careful with my words this time around, because this time last year when we'd signed Jake Livermore, I was not happy at all. And yeah, look, I am hoping that he can have an impact. I think he will have an impact. And I think the feeling around Sissoko signing, while there are a lot of almost doubters, I think the feeling is overall more positive than when Jake Livermore came in. But yeah, he is someone who, while he's 34, does seem to be quite fit, and did play in Ligue 1 last season as well. So yeah, right behind him, and hopefully he has a good season for us.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on this one on socials at WD18 fans. Let us know in the comment section below. I think this is one that we'll only know how well he'll do, as with most signings, by the end of the season. But Sissoko has returned to Watford on a 2-year deal as a free agent. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to WD18, follow Sam, myself on our social channels at WD18, at WD18 fans, as I said, and we will see you very soon for another video. And if you enjoy these transfer videos, let us know, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care. You odds!